Good evening, everyone. My name's Elizabeth Gessel, and I'm the Director of Public Programs at Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco. MoAD is a contemporary art museum, and our exhibitions and programming inspire learning through the global lens of the African diaspora. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the different challenges we are facing. MoAD stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter in recognizing and condemning the ongoing systemic violence against Black people. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, Casey Goodson Jr., Patrick Warren Sr., Andre Hill, Dante Wright, and Ma'Khia Bryant, and so many others who have lost their lives from police brutality and racial injustice, including those whose names we do not know. We want to acknowledge that MoAD's commitment to racial justice is ongoing, and as such, we will continue to say their names to hold space and honor these victims. I also want to acknowledge the spaces we are occupying. Though we are gathering virtually, many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent. Our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples on whose land we are located. It is with deep respect that MoAD acknowledges that even in virtual space, we reside on unceded native lands and thank the indigenous people of the Bay Area and beyond who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I welcome you to MoAD Online and to the program series African Diaspora Film Club, presented in partnership with Black Public Media and Cuba Caribe. Our host, Cornelius Moore, is the co-director of California Newsreel, the 52-year-old social issue nonprofit film distribution and production company. He is also an independent film curator specializing in works from and about the Black world. Modeled after a book club, we expect that you will have already viewed the film when you join us for today's discussion. If you haven't already seen the film, please stick around. We just can't guarantee that we won't have any spoilers. I want to thank everyone here today who has joined us, with special appreciation for those who have donated to the museum during this pandemic. We would not be able to produce this programming without your support. And now I want to introduce you to Jamaica Atul Simmons, Executive Director of Cuba Caribe.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Cuba Caribe's mission is to preserve, promote, and present the vibrant artistic and cultural traditions of the Caribbean and its diaspora. Founded on the principle that music and dance have the power to unite people of diverse perspectives, which we all really need right now in the world, we foster understanding and appreciation of Caribbean arts through our programming. And we are so happy to partner with MoAD for this discussion. It's close to our mission and our heart. And I'm going to just say one plug for us as we have upcoming events in July and November, so stay tuned for that as well. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Jamaica. So thank you for co-presenting today's program, where we'll be discussing Bakosó, Afrobeats de Cuba, the fabulous documentary by Eli Jacobs-Fantauzzi. Eli is a graduate of UC Berkeley. He received his MA degree from NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. He's an internationally recognized and award-winning filmmaker. He's the co-founder and director of Fist Up TV, an international media platform uplifting and telling stories from underrepresented communities across the world. His work has circulated through national broadcast, Free Speech TV, Teaching Channel, and PBS. Currently, Eli lives in Puerto Rico and is working on his new film, We Still Here, a story of resilience and recovery in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. His dedication to his craft is deeply connected to his commitment to social justice and the belief in the transformative power of film. We'll start the discussion today with Cornelius and Eli, and we encourage everyone to participate by making comments in the chat and submitting questions through the Q&A box. And finally, please take a moment to type where you are joining us from in the chat. We love finding the diaspora in our audience. So take it away, Eli and Cornelius.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. And welcome, Eli.
Thank you.
It's funny. I just thought Jamaica with Cuba Caribe just asked me, have I been dancing? And it's like, the answer was like, yes, I have been watching Bakosó. How could I not? So thank you for making this a great film with such energy in it, and
Thank
the
you.
connections that you made with it. And I also want to thank you for introducing me to Está Rico by Marc Anthony and Will Smith and Bad Bunny, and then now what is it? Made for Now by with Janet Jackson, Daddy Yankee, because I felt like I didn't know him, but since you mentioned that they were influenced by the music in your film, that I should watch them. So I got a whole education of the whole part of pop culture that I have not been connected to. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Cornelius. It is definitely one of the what we set out to do. Documentary films, a lot of times you leave the theater or you leave watching the film feeling so down about the world, and everybody's depressed. You got tears in your eye, and sometimes you feel like there's nothing you could do. The world is just messed up. So we wanted to flip it on the head, and hopefully you leave the theater dancing. So good to hear that you got to dance along the Bakosó.
Yeah. And so the film has been on World Public Broadcasting, right? The World Channel.
The World Channel, yes. Thank you to Black Public Media, the Afropop series, World Channel, PBS. It has been an amazing dream of mine to have it shown for free in people's living rooms.
So is it still available by streaming for people?
Yeah, it's still available. You can check it out online. We have film festivals coming up, so I'll give more information down the line. Okay,
great. So I know, and I've been to Cuba once, and I went to Havana, and that's what a lot of people think of, that Havana as Cuba. But clearly, in your film, Santiago de Cuba is very central to Cuban culture. So I definitely want to go now. And so tell me about your journey and how you started out in the film in Havana, and then you went to Santiago. Tell us about that and how you.
So I do. Eli Jacobs-Fantauzzi. He went to Cuba in '94 to protest the embargo and the blockade. And so when I went down there a little bit later, I brought my mom's video camera and I started shooting everybody that we met, and we were hanging out with the hip hop scene. So we did our first film, Inventos Hip Hop Cubano. And then our second film is called Homegrown Hip Life in Ghana. And that's about the high life and hip hop music fusing, coming together and creating hip life. And that's really the backbone of what today is known as Afrobeats with the S, the urban, the street music, the youth music coming out of the continent of Africa. So when I go back now to Cuba and I show East Nye, who's in the film, I show him the documentary, he's like, what? This is like what we're doing back home in Santiago on the other side of the island. And he played for me Oscuro Delgado's track, Llora Como Llore Yo. And it just blew my socks off. And we decided at that moment, there's a birth of a new genre of music happening in Santiago de Cuba, and we have to go out there and document it.
And so central to your film is DJ, how do you say
Jigüe?
Jigüe. So how did you meet him, and and how did you decide to use him to sort of, I guess, curate your journey?
So we met after I did that hip hop film. We believe in non-extractive storytelling. We believe in just storytelling. What does justice look like in storytelling? And like I said, a lot of people go and mine stories or tell stories about communities that aren't doing well. And sometimes they're worse off after the film comes out. So we believe, telling stories with community rather than about community is so much stronger. When we went around and showed the film to universities, we got some money and we put together a tour to go back and uplift the Cuban hip hop community that already gave us so much. And we thought, what would be significant to elevate the music and the culture in Cuba? So we brought the first CDJs because, they weren't pressing up vinyl. They couldn't scratch their own music. And so by bringing turntable CDJs, then they could scratch their own music while they're performing. And so that group of about 9 people landed in Santiago first. And when we presented Inventos, DJ Jigüe was there, and he was already organizing the Cuban hip hop community. And we just stayed, you know, friends over years and years. After 10 years, we became family. After, you know, 15 years, we decided to do this film. And so, yeah, because it was his journey going back to Santiago that really was like, he was on a mission to find, what is this sound? What is the new sound of Santiago? Who are the pioneers? What is it being mixed with? And that's what the film does.
And so he mentioned that it was, what did he say? He was doing tropical Afrofuturism. And I thought that was a great term. Can you get more to say about that? I mean, because Afrofuturism is a term that's bandied about so much now. So how did he get connected with that?
It's like in his blood. You know, when you think of like Sun Ra, or if you think of Africa Bambaataa, or these people, it's not like, I don't think it's like how they got connected with it. They just like tapped in, you know, they're just funky with it. And so I think it's in his blood. But you know, he likes to really push the limits and think about the future while bringing the past to the present and the future. And I think that's what Bakosó also does, is it's able to reach back into the history, into the roots, and create a new genre of music. And it's something that we see happen all the time. Different music has always flowed through Cuba, and they have a way of mixing it, creating something new, making it their own, and putting it out into the world. And Bakosó is just a new example of that.
So it's kind of a fusion music, but you mentioned that that Semba and Kuduro, which are from Angola, had an impact on the music. And I'm was curious about that connection, because we know that Cuba did solidarity missions, we say, to, you know, basically when South Africa was invading Angola, to support them, push back the apartheid forces. So there were Cuban troops that went there, and also people went there afterwards, you know, doing teaching and other kind of medical missions. So some folks came back and brought the music, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm also curious how much it was that, and how much it was also the people who were, you know, Africans who were, you know, brought to Cuba, you know, from that region, and if the music was kind of already there, and then it sort of added more layer and layer. So what do you have to say about that from what you've learned?
Yeah, so thousands and thousands of Cubans died, you know, for the liberation of Angola, but not just Angola, different countries all over the continent. So it's a very important history that we should look up and know. So DJ Jigüe's mother was actually sent on a mission, and that's part of the film. They talk about him being raised by his grandma. And so that's why the first stop that we go to is to grandma's house. I think the main influence now is from the African medical students. Afrobeats is a very wide term that it doesn't specify what countries in Africa the music's coming from. If it's urban, if it's new, and if it's coming out of the continent, they call it Afrobeats. But each country has their own specific sound. South Africa has Kwaito, Kuduro out of Angola, Niger pop out of Nigeria, Azonto and Hip Life coming out of Ghana. So everybody has their own flavor. And when they go to the medical school, it's an international school. There's students from all over, and they bring their music and culture. And so I think it happened naturally that these kids, these young students, are in Kiki Pro's studio recording when, you know, Michael Padrino is in there. And we go to the studio in the film and you see them overlapping and crossing. So it's like this conversation back and forth. And I think what the past has done is create the foundation in which those relationships now can be built upon. So when we go to Abuela's house, you see the ceremony and you see her talking in Yoruban words and blessing the journey. And so Bakosó is actually a Yoruban word. It comes from Obakosó. And it's a celebration that the king is not dead, and they're talking about Chango. But the youth in Santiago talked about it like the party because it's a celebration. So they grew up saying, yo, where's the Bakosó this weekend? Oh, let's go to the Bakosó. And so when this new genre of music comes about, they're like, okay, we're going to call this Bakosó. So it's kind of like the past merging with the current influences in creating Bakosó.
But Bakosó is mainly headquartered in Santiago, or is it also, they do it in Havana too?
Definitely. I don't know. Actually, I have heard some Santiago, Havana artists, but it comes from Santiago de Cuba. And as you said, Havana is 90 miles from Miami. So when we did the hip hop documentary, it made sense that it was focused in Havana, because in Alamar, they had signals that could catch radio waves from Miami. But if we look at Santiago de Cuba, you could see Jamaica from the mountains of Santiago. And so the radio airwaves that they could catch were coming out of Jamaica, and Haiti's right there as well. And so it's like the center of the Caribbean, people would say. And I'm sure you know, as Marcus Garvey created the UNIA, they wanted the headquarters in Santiago de Cuba because of that Pan-Africanist center of the Caribbean right there in Santiago de Cuba.
I think I heard you say on a radio program, I think it was Walter Turner's show, reminding people that Rita Marley was born in Santiago. I was like, whoa.
Like, wow. Yeah.
I had no idea about that. Yeah. So both in the film and some of the imagery in the film, and also, you know, an interview with Jigüe's grandma, Santeria plays a real important role in the music in the film too. So you said a little bit about it. You want to elaborate more about that connection?
For sure. I think that Cuba has done an amazing job of keeping those traditions and spirituality alive. And it's not just Santeria, it's Palo, it's
Palo's from Congo.
Yes,
right.
Definitely. So many different ones, but of course we say Santeria and we incorporate a lot of them because it's African spirituality is what it is, and it's the connection directly to the continent. And it's amazing to see that some of them know like the Yoruban words and have kept the language through slavery, through colonization, and now, like, even back in their homelands or in Nigeria, they've lost some of those prayers in the language. So it's really amazing. And I think when we ask Raúl Millares in the film, right, he says that that a culture that can't, you know, be significant today is on its way to cultural suicide. And Bakosó is an example of bringing those traditions with us, making them modern, bringing it forward, and holding on to culture. And that was just one of my favorite parts, or quotes in the film.
Well, I've seen, for example, Nigerians, and they'll see something from Cuba, like a religious practice, and they'll be, wow, that's the way it used to be done 300 years ago. We just like do it really quickly, you know, and the tradition is kind of lost, and they're learning and away from the people who kept the traditions really alive.
When we talk about Pan-Africanism, I think it's so important to think of these expressions that we have that have made it through such devastation, and what an honor to be able to uplift and hold them.
I want to ask you, shift a little bit about hip hop and its relationship to Afrobeats, Bakosó, and I know that, you know, hip hop is a rebellious music everywhere, right? And it's going to be that way in Cuba too. And they, the authorities and the hip hop community have seemed to come to some kind of you know, way of coexisting. So are the artists in the hip hop community in Cuba related to Afrobeats de Cuba? And I'd like to hear you talk more about that connection.
Yeah, I think it was really amazing to have the International Hip Hop Festival for over a decade in Havana de Cuba. I met so many people around the world at that festival that would come and perform. I was there when Dead Prez came, Tony Touch, when Chucky Town, they weren't even called Chucky Town, from Colombia came. And so it was really like a center for us all to get together, and it was put on by the Cuban government. Today, what they have is a Cuban rap agency. And so they pay young folks to make music and do workshops in communities. But then that's kind of like here, that's like working in the system. There are people that are getting grants and doing hip hop education, but there are people that work outside of the system as well and just do their thing on their street corner, in their barber shop, in their house. So it's interesting that I met Jigüe through the hip hop community during those hip hop festivals. And also Oscaro Delgado came from a group called Golpe Seco that's out of Santiago de Cuba. So I know him from those days. Even Cameron, who is on the soundtrack, I shot a music video for his group back in the day. They were called Sentimientos Raperos. So a lot of those people who are now doing Bakosó or different fusion music came from the hip hop community.
I have a question about how, well, Cubans are very resourceful, and there's a blockade, there are all kind of economic pressures on folks. So how are people able to, one, build their studios? I'm amazed at that. Two, do these music videos. Where are they getting the funds and the resources to do that?
Yeah, so I think two things are happening. I think the technology is becoming more accessible, meaning the cost isn't as high. We see that all over the world, especially like places, Brazil was able to start like using Fruity Loops and different programs and creating.
What? That's cereal to me. So what are you talking about?
There's a program on PC computers called Fruity Loops. That,
okay.
And we're talking about more than a decade ago. And on your laptop, like $50 to $100 laptop, you could start producing and making music. And that's what you saw happen around the world was access, just like filmmaking and videos, right? Before it was digital, you had to have a whole lot of money to be able to capture those images. So that's on one hand. And then you have a Cuban diaspora, friends and family who continue to go home and support their family. So I think some of the technology is brought then back to Cuba through those means. But it's also just the dedication. Like if you know this is what you want to do with your life, you're not going to stop until you get it done. And there's the scene in the film when Isnai visits Oscaro's house and he's talking about how he's producing. And he's like, yeah, you see these speakers, and he holds up the monitors to his ear because they don't have the resources like other people do around the world, but they don't let that stop them, and they're still able to create something so beautiful. I just want to big up Ramon. I see him from Colombia, from El Chocó. What's happening, Ramon? We got people from Puerto Rico, Jorge. It's great to see the rest of the world joining us tonight.
I guess the other question is about how people learn about the music, because you have a scene with the DJ is on the radio. So tell us about that. Are people also learning about the music? Well, they're learning about the music live because you've show people do that, but on the radio or also on the internet, and how are people also getting the recordings?
So, Cuba is a very unique place, and they have their own systems of how to distribute music. Really what happens is you have to become famous locally. So once you have, your town, whether it's like La Maya or whether it's Palmas or any province, you got to get big in Santiago. And once you got Santiago popping, people are going to start talking about you in Havana. And then once you're on the radio and you start getting love in Havana, then what they do is they have like these memory sticks. They call them el paquete. And so they distribute applications, music videos, music all through el paquete. So that's how you get. And once you get famous in Cuba, then the diaspora starts bringing your music to the States. And so what happened, particularly with Bakosó, is the med school students now would go home and bring these Cuban Bakosó, this music, and a lot of them, they're featuring the Angolan students or Ghanaian students. So they go home and they become famous outside of Cuba then.
Okay, all right. So are they able to tour? I mean, we see with the Afro Latino Festival, the DJ went, and
Yes.
so, but what's the situation now? I mean,
So
given
DJ Jigüe has been doing music for, you know, over 20 years, and he was a DJ in a jazz group. And what happened was he was able to get a visa through that. And they performed on Tiny Desk, and, you know, they traveled the world. As a DJ, he's traveled the world. So when we did the film, I was super blessed that he already had a visa. So we did tours around we did Yerba Buena Center, we did Stanford University in the Bay, but we also did Southern California. We went to Trinidad together, and we were able to do that. And as soon as Trump got into office, he ended all of that. And so, and Biden hasn't done anything effective to change the situation. And so it's going to take all of us to hold him accountable. He said that he's going to bring back the relations to Cuba. It's all of our responsibility to end the blockade, end the embargo. People are dying. They need syringes from COVID. This is the time. So make sure that you're, you know, out there in the protest, signing online, letting people know that this is a human rights violation, and we need to end this embargo now.
Thank you for that. Yes. So, and the music too. How people get a hold of the music?
So you could get the music on a bunch of streaming platforms. Their favorite would be Bandcamp, because they get actual a good percentage of the money if you purchase it from Bandcamp. So I would say that first, but also on any of the normal streaming platforms, you can find these artists. So check out DJ Jigüe, Oscar Delgado, Michael Padrino, so many great music, Cameron.
So are you able to put that in the chat?
Wow, so the easiest thing I'm gonna put here is Bakosó _Cuba. And I just went to the panelists.
Okay.
Panelists and attendees. Here we go. I got it. Bakosó _Cuba. So if you go there, what we do in the post is we tag them, and that's the easiest way. There's a lot of artists in the film that you want to check out, so you could go click on them and find their music. So yes, please give us a follow.
Well, that's very valuable, because I watched the film 3 times, and I was like, I couldn't keep up with all the artists. You know, like bam, 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 bam. You know, So yeah, something where we have an idea where their names are and connecting them to their music would be really great.
Definitely. Google does an amazing job. If you just put in Bakosó soundtrack, you'll see the video that we shot for the soundtrack. So you definitely want to check that one out as well.
So you have a soundtrack for the movie?
So the title track of the film. So we call it Bakosó se va en la calle, Bakosó se escucha la casa. That
one. Let's see if people have questions or anything about things here. Oops. So I don't think there are any questions, but people should ask us questions.
Yeah, you can take this time to write some questions in the chat. We would love to hear from you.
Oh, somebody from Australia too. Did you notice that?
Wow. Nice. I guess I'll take a quick second to say thank you to the Elizabeth and MoAD, the Museum of African Diaspora of San Francisco. We screened our first ever film. We screened Inventos there. We screened Homegrown, the follow-up film that I was talking about. We screened Tengo Talento there. It's just been a great space to bring people together, and I thank you so much. And big up to Cuba Caribe as well, Jamaica. We screened at their festival. We were out there with Ramon and other dance crew in Santiago de Cuba during Festival de Fuego. We were filming. So it feels so good to be in community and to be supported in this way. So thank you.
I remember Tengo Talento because we showed it was connected to a Afro-Cuban exhibit that MoAD was doing. And it was that same day that President Obama had made the announcement of, opening of relations.
Wow.
And there were people there at the screening who were like, we were talking about it, and they were like, what are you talking about? They had not heard about it because they hadn't listened to the news. So maybe this film will do some some brujeria,
Let's see.
where things will happen and change in that regard.
We hope. Actually, the hip hop group that's featured in Tengo Talento is the other half of Golpe Seco. So the thing is that's what I'm saying, that these relationships have built over years and years, and until it becomes family, and that's that the intimacy that you get in the film is because of that.
Great. So there is a question, and it's from Micah, that about were you did you have the story before you started the film in general, and also an editing question: did you edit as you went along while you were filming, or was it done after?
So it was done after, and these are all part of the learning process. So I'm just gonna put it out there. We actually started when we went, and we were thinking of the whole Caribbean connection. We talked to a bunch of professors who could really break it down of this cultural phenomenon of the cultural context is different than Havana, and like they go really deep and educational. And then we took a step back and we said, okay, this doesn't feel like Bakosó. This isn't the film that we want to make. But the part that we did like in it was following Jigüe to all of these people. So then that next time we go to Cuba, we're like, okay, we're gonna take those folks out and we're just gonna focus on Jigüe going and meeting these people. And so that's how the film came about. The editor is Aliang, who's an amazing editor and who we've worked with in the past. And they actually edited the whole team besides me and Khalil were Cubanos, were in Cuba. And so that was very tricky. You can imagine we get out there as much as we could and we stay with them and be in the editing studio. Isnai was a big part of also being in the studio. And then when we could, they would send cuts. So they would send versions back and forth. And in the way that you do this, I'm gonna let you in on a hint, is that you have to have 2 hard drives with the exact same file system, the same information. So if you send the project file, and that's only a couple megabytes, you could send that in an email super quick. You could send versions back and forth. And so that's how we did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have another question. I'm not sure about this. So somebody hasn't seen the film, Liz saying, I was wondering what stories the musicians tell through lyrics and music.
It's a good question. I think like almost in every genre, you have a huge slew of different topics. What I'm drawn to most is when, reaching back and bringing it forward. So I love when Oscuro Delgado speaks in Yoruban and like does prayers and talks. I think he has a song called Bendición, and that talks about blessings. But then you also have like the party music for the club, or talking about girls. You have explicit lyrics that El Inca is known for being like the explicit one, and he gets kind of famous because he goes outside of the box and does wild stuff. So I think you have different people come like in every part of the genre making a name for themselves.
From your film, it's a very male world.
Yeah.
So but for now, what is that is bound to change. So what's happening with that?
Man, that it's time for a change. That male patriarchy is deep rooted in colonialism, and we need to tear it down. And I see it around the world, and Cuba is no different. I will say that if you watch the film, you will see the backbone being women. You have the film, well, I don't want to give away too much, but we have El Egua opening and closing the film, right? And throughout, and it's played by Jenny Set, who's an amazing folkloric dancer. You see Jigüe going to Abuela's house and getting the blessing on his journey. And then you see his wife, who was, you know, when he gets home and she's pregnant with the kid, giving him the news. So yeah, I think in terms of music, we definitely need to make space to have that women voice. And I am happy to say that just recently, last week, they sent me a couple music videos of mujeres haciendo Bakosó.
Okay. Oh, there's another question from Frida. She says, I miss how you got the funds and how long did it take you to make. I didn't ask that question. She loved the music and the dance. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I've had a very long journey in documentary filmmaking, and it's never been funded by big funders. We have done crowdfunding campaigns, and my community really loves and supports what I do, like you that showed up tonight. And you know, I've been able to raise maybe 10,000, a little bit more for different projects that I do. So that really helped push us forward to be able to get this done. But my brother is a teacher. He teaches 5th grade in Brooklyn. And I do freelance videography on the side. And when a story calls us, we put our resources and time into telling the story. I'm happy to say that this next film that I'm doing in Puerto Rico finally got a little bit of institutional money. It's nowhere close to like the film ITVS or PBS funding that's like upwards of 200,000, but I got like, you know, 20, or I got a couple of different other ones. So yeah, we're slowly, and I think one of the big problems is that they're used to funding the same stories over and over. When I was doing Homegrown Hip Life in Ghana, to see young kids make it from the ghetto in Accra, from Nima, and going to South Africa and performing and winning best music group of the whole continent. They're like, this isn't a story we've seen before. You know, if it's not Civil War or orphans or stories that you could relate to, oh, this is like Hotel Rwanda, this is like Blood Diamond, then they don't see how it's going to make money. How are we going to market it? I mean, I think that's been a problem. And what I'm seeing slowly, it's a slow process, is people saying, okay, this cat's been doing this for a long time. We're now looking at how can storytelling be less extractive. And so when they look at a filmmaker like me, who's been independent, they say, okay, he's starting to create a model. He has a model. He's been doing this for a while. Let's pick his brain. Let's sit down with him and see what this looks like moving forward. How can we change the documentary industry for the better?
Speaking to that, did you ever consider, and was this ever a possibility that a recording company would come on board? And what did you think? What did you think of that if they were? What kind of negotiations would you have to have with them so that, you know, you would do what you really wanted to do?
Yeah, very rarely or never has it been done right. The music industry is very similar to the film industry. When you make a film, you put all your money into the film, and then you have to do a film festival run. And the film festival will ask you to pay just to submit your film. And so, for example, Sundance will have thousands of submissions. So your whatever, couple $1,000 film is going up against what they call indie films, but are $1 million budget.
Right.
$1 million is still considered a low budget. So, and then, so you pay, if you get in, you have to pay for your people to go, you have to pay for promotion. And they're charging people $10, $15 to go and see your film, all in the hopes that somebody picks it up, some distributor picks it up. But it's not sustainable. What record companies do, we know, is they give a little money to thousands, and then they're hoping that just one blows up. And if that one blows up, they don't pay attention to anybody else. And that's just the model. So we've been doing this for a very long time. We do it independent. The Bay Area has taught me so much. I'm so thankful to be from the Bay. the independent spirit of selling hip hop tapes out of the backpack, out of the car, has really pushed my independent spirit. You have Jigüe, who created the first ever independent record label in Havana. It's called Guampara Records. And so we're all doing it. And it's taken a slow process to build steam, but I think we're slowly getting it. Hey, we're on World Channel, PBS, and that was just dreams, you know, until this year. That was just a dream that I had, but now it's reality.
So how do you have an independent label in Cuba? That's one question. And then Agram is the, how do you say Agram?
The huge studio.
Are they also a record company, or they're different? So
I think they did have they did put out music as well at one point, but that's through the Cuban government, and the Cuban government does not have money to push and promote that music properly. And so what happens is they've linked up with other record companies to then push Egren studios and records around the world. And so that's similar to what Guampara does. And you have to have like a part of it in the United States, so that, you know, it is very complicated. When you start talking about business, you know, that's where the law says you can't. And so I'm not going to put it all out there, but there's a way, you know, it has to be based in the United States if you want to be able to copyright, sell music online, and do all of that stuff. So you need those kind of partnerships.
Okay. So another question about your inspiration for film and movies. I mean, what are you seeing that inspired you, and who in their work has inspired you?
So growing up, my mom always said that I'm not in public school, I'm in her school. She's just subcontracting the public school. Anytime Spike Lee put out a film, she would take us out of school, we'd go and watch it and have a discussion. So Spike Lee was always a huge inspiration for me. Also people like Matthew Kosovitz, who was also influenced by Spike, who did La Haine, was a huge
French filmmaker, right? Yeah.
Yes. But then as I started moving forward, people that could do it independently and became friends. I tried to get as close to my mentors as possible to see how they moved in the world. So people like Rachel Ramses, people like Maori, people like Joshua Bialafia, so many amazing indie filmmakers that were just a little bit older than me that really put me under their wing and say, you know, this is what I'm doing, this is how I do it. So I give so much thanks and praise to those people for opening doors for me.
Oh, great. So let's swing back to the project you're working on now. You referred to the work that you're doing in Puerto Rico, and I'm dying to hear more about that. And what was the inspiration for that, and what's the idea behind it?
So I'm a co-founder of an organization called Defend Puerto Rico. And in my Puerto Rican identity growing up in the Bay Area was rough. You know, there's not a lot of Caribbean folks in the Bay. So I was with the Mexicanos and the Black folks, and I was in both student unions, and I saw myself as a bridge. And so when I did Inventos or when I do Bakosó, I'm thinking of, you know, how can we bring these communities together? And then I learned that they had Puerto Rican political prisoners in Dublin, Federal State Penitentiary. And so we started to visit a woman named Dilcia Pagan. And so
Dublin, California, for people in the, you know.
Yes, Dublin, California, just, you know, not far away from the Bay. And so my cultural identity as a Puerto Rican has always been tied very closely to politics, who we are politically in the world, as a colony of the United States. And so when I heard that Borinquen was $72 billion in debt, I wanted to go and check on my family. A brother that I met through Libertad Tour that my brother created, his name's Mikey Cordero, wanted to do the same thing. We formed a crew, we called it Defend Puerto Rico, and we started to go and tell stories. We did an exhibit of that show in Oakland, California. And Puerto Rico got hit by Hurricane Irma at the same time, and Hurricane Maria was on its way. And so people were devastated. They couldn't hear from family. And I was invited to go back to the island with Rosa Clemente, who's a great activist, Puerto Rican activist out of New York. So when I was going, people said, here's some money. Donations started coming in. My whole living room came up with donations. I brought 36 boxes back to Puerto Rico and some cash on me. And we started buying things that people needed. We went to a spot in the mountains called Comerío, which is a small little neighborhood in between these mountains. And we gave out the goods, but it felt horrible to give them those things and they didn't have a roof over their head. So we said, next week we'll bring the tarps. And we saw that they were ready to put it up. They were organized. And that process just started building. What else do you need? What are the needs of the community? We invited La Maraña, who's a women-led participatory design project. And so really it's about, what does justice look like in recovery? So what does a just recovery look like? How do you take the skills and resources already in the community and help their dreams come true, rather than throwing water bottles out of helicopters or paper towels at the people? So that film is called We Still Here, and you can check it out online at our website, fistup.tv. I'm gonna put it in the link for y'all.
Okay. So it sounds like it's about sort of documenting the activity that people are doing now to build infrastructure and things that are, counter to the way things are in Puerto Rico, and a way of combating colonialism that's there, right?
Exactly.
From the U.S.
Exactly, and hopefully it's a model. But after any disaster, you see people, Black folks and poor folks, hit first and the worst always. And so hopefully this can really be a model of what does justice look like moving forward, whether it's COVID, whether it's a tornado, earthquake, how to do it in a just manner.
And which will be incredibly valuable anyway, but given that the way, the world is going because of climate disaster, we're going to see more and more of those.
Right.
So we have a question from Julie Fry. She wants to know, what's the most important thing you learned from the process of making Bakosó, and what will you take with you to the next one that you make?
I just telling the film in community again has been so rewarding. Our next screening we're doing with Candela Book Club, and we're raising funds to get to the artists. When COVID hit, we started getting them money right away. They don't have a way to perform, make money. There's no tourists coming in. So that felt really good to be able to bring Jigüe to Trinidad for the first time, going to another Caribbean island, blew his mind, and he loved that so much. So I definitely took that and deepened it in this next film. In this next film, what we're doing is we're teaching them filmmaking and giving them cameras of how to tell their own stories. So that's a part of it. Yeah, and I think we'll continue to give people access to something that is very hard to access. Like, I don't think I've ever seen Palmas or La Maya on screen, especially a big screen. And these are little provinces in Santiago de Cuba. And so hopefully, folks, I don't think a lot of people have been to Comerío, a small mountain town in the middle of the island. And so, yeah, I think that's part of our mission, is to continue to amplify the beauty of who we are and put that out there for the world to see.
What's the filmmaking scene like in Puerto Rico, and for documentary film and films on social issues? That's one part of the question. The other is that, are people leaving in order to make films or make a living? Because a lot of Puerto Ricans have gone to Tampa and other places on the U.S. mainland.
Yes, that's a huge problem, I think, everywhere in the world. They call it brain drain. And that's when you are a professional at what you do, but you don't see an opportunity to continue doing it where you are. And so you leave where you're from. And so we need that if we want countries to be able to do better and to thrive and succeed. We have to create those opportunities for people in their home countries. So people are leaving at a huge rate. And what we see in our film is what happens when young folks become leaders and fight for their rights, become civically engaged and demand more from their government and the United States government. So yeah, I think that's it. What the second part of your question was?
The filmmaking scene.
Oh, the filmmaking scene in Puerto Rico is amazing. You have the very colonial US, like Fast and the Furious types coming in, but you also have a huge independent scene. Funding has always been a problem because we're kind of in limbo. Like, we don't get international funds because they say you're a part of the US. And part of the US, you're like, oh, you're not main territory US. So it's always hard. But I want to big up ADOC, which is the Documentary Film Association, who's done amazing work on the island to especially bring the documentary filmmakers together, get resources. I even just showed them the last cut of my film. They let me know what they thought moving forward. So really creating a community and instead of competition, seeing us and giving resources and lifting us up. So it's a beautiful place to be.
So is there a portal or website that people can make donations for We Still Here?
Yes, on that same website, the fistup.tv, if you go to We Still Here, we have an Indiegogo campaign that you can still donate to.
Okay.
We appreciate that.
Okay, great. Back to the filmmaking scene in Puerto Rico, what about the public TV arms there? Is that a possibility? What's because for a lot of independent filmmakers, broadcast TV is at least offers a hope of some funding.
Yeah, is very low. They don't got a lot of funding, and it is not the route that or what people aspire to do. And people like Firelight, Loida Limbal has been able to go down there and really like bring funders to the island and say, check out this amazing work that's happening. So in these past few years, you have seen strides made to get filmmakers funded. The Philadelphia Latino Film Festival always has an eye out to Puerto Rico. They do an amazing job. And so locally, hopefully San Francisco Film Festival and other Latino film festivals takes a look at what is coming out of Puerto Rico, because having a platform to be able to tell those stories would be really great.
I'm glad you mentioned the film festivals. I was asking about a film. Is there a film festival in San Juan or other places in Puerto Rico that can also lift up filmmakers?
Oh yeah, we do. We got them going for many, many years, for sure. The Puerto Rico International Film Festival, they have a Rincon International Film Festival, and a couple others.
Okay. So tell people where you are in Puerto Rico.
So right now, currently, I'm in Carolina. I live in Carolina. That's where my aunties live, and I would come here as a young child. And I live near the airport, near the beach. I try to go to the beach every day as a part of my meditation and well-being. And I feel honored to be in this paradise, the land of the Arawak and Taino people.
Let's see here. I think there's another question. Yeah. Oh, I didn't see that question. Thank you, Elizabeth. Someone asked about the description of the African religious influence on the Cuban music. I wonder if you think is the same with the music in Brazil. I don't see the influence in our music in Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic, although our African roots are quite present, from La Bomba to reggaeton. So what do you think about that?
There are PhDs, and not just one, many written on this subject. but it ties back to the conversation that we were having earlier. If you look at Bakosó and what Raúl Miyares was talking about, the importance of the cimarrón, right? And these
cimarrones are
Maroons.
communities of free Black people, right?
Right, who escaped slavery and created communities. And that's what I'm saying, like these cultural traditions made it through colonial. In Puerto Rico, it was illegal to play drums. They try to, they banned our religions, they banned our languages, they banned our drum. And so to still have that, to have bomba in Puerto Rico is a direct tie to our African ancestry. And so I think that it is present, and we just need to keep creating space for it. And it's so exciting to me to see the youth loving it. Like if you come to Puerto Rico today, tomorrow, there's a huge bombazo in La Pela every Monday. And it's all young folks of all shades of color playing their hearts out, dancing, singing, and keeping the culture and tradition alive. And it gives me so much hope. And you see that all over Latin America. You definitely see it with the Garifuna communities. And so you see it in Santo Domingo, Colombia, Belize, Honduras, and they're all connected. If you look at it, you'll see so many similarities. It has that same, the same feel, the same beauty. I'll tell a real quick one. I love the mockery of the colonialists. So in Santiago de Cuba, they have a dance that imitates the French colonialists because they fled Haiti and went to Cuba after the revolution. And so they go there with their skirts and it looks like bomba and they're mocking like a ballroom dance. And like, we could do what you do and we could do it better.
So people who don't know, that's a great story. For people who don't know, bomba, say a little bit about that.
So bomba and plena music. Bomba comes through the continent and reaches the shores of Puerto Rico, and each town has its own rhythms. One of the famous towns is Loíza, and there are two main families that have kept the tradition for so long. And we have Julia Cepeda in the Bay Area that teaches bomba from this family lineage. Bariles are drums, and they're made out of the rum barrel, because of course you have to inventar, you have to make it up. You couldn't bring your drums. So those big rum barrels, they would put skin over it and they made their drums. So the drums we call in bomba are called bariles. They're not congas. And they're a bunch of different dances to the different types of rhythms. And the last thing I'll say about bomba is it's the only dance that I know which the dancer is telling the drummer what rhythms to play. So it's a conversation that the dancer is leading, playing with the drummer.
Thank you for that. And for also mentioning Loira Dembal, because the next program we're going to do is with her.
Oh,
with her wonderful, very moving film, Through the Night. And I'm forgetting the day. Oops, when is the day? It is the 16th.
Wonderful. Oh man, she's so amazing. You're so lucky to have her. Make sure you sign up for that conversation. I'll be there as well.
No, it's not the 16th. It's June
the 6th.
Thank
June
you.
6th.
Yeah, June 6th. It's amazing. It was just on
PBS.
PB, yeah, and still streaming. So it's very moving. Yeah. Right, good. It's just, the 6th. Okay. We're sort of running out of time here. Is that just use this opportunity to plug everything you can plug?
All right, here we go. You ready for the rundown? Make sure you check in on the website, fistup.tv. And if you're on Instagram, it's at fistuptv. On May 19th, we have the Candela Book Club, where we're raising funds to send back to Santiago. On May 20th, you have the Hape Party, which DJ Jigüe and others from Guampara Records are going to perform live from Cuba. So you definitely want to tap in and check that out. It's amazing that they could transmit live from the island. So that's on the 20th. And on May 27th, we have our 12th annual Fist Up Film Festival. and we're showing Bakosó with the artist in the film. So make sure you sign up for that.
Great. All right. Eli.
Cornelius, man, what
thank
a
you so
great
much.
honor to be able to
Yeah.
have this time with you in conversation.
Yeah. Well, maybe next time in person in Puerto Rico.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Cornelius, and thank you, Eli. I'm always inspired by the work that you do and by you as a person. You're just amazing. So
thank
you're
you.
always welcome at MoAD. And thank you, Jamaica, for co-presenting today's program. Cuba Caribe is also a longtime partner of MoAD, so we're all family, and it's wonderful to be together in this virtual space. Thank you to Black Public Media for also supporting Eli's work and for co-sponsoring today's program and the series. And like Cornelius mentioned, we are going to be discussing Through the Night on Sunday, June 6th at 5 p.m. with Loira Limbal. So please join us then. And we also would love to hear from you about your feedback about today's program. I just put a link to a survey in the chat. It should pop up also after you leave this Zoom. And of course, we always appreciate any type of donation that you can give to support the museum and the work that we do. But first, give it to Eli.
We count on the community so much. So give a little bit to everybody. I appreciate you so much. Abrazos, mi gente. Abrazos. Gracias.
Good night, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.